I think it's really interesting that kneeling has come back into the collective consciousness here over the last 10 or 12 years in the West. Just as a gesture, it's not something that you would really think about very much. Maybe 15 years ago, you'd say, oh, well, okay, it's a Family Feud thing. It's like, all right, situations where you would kneel. To propose. Show me to propose. Number 2. Ding, ding, ding. That's great. That's amazing. Okay, chance to steal. And look back over at your team. Look back up and go with, I'll go with in church or praying. Show me church or praying. That's the top answer. Those would be the 2 things that people would come up with, right? For when you kneel in some kind of public situation that involves a display or making a gesture. But since 12 or 15 years ago, the kneeling thing has become a political gesture of submission again, which is really actually more in keeping with how people have thought of kneeling for like all of human history, because it's a very vulnerable gesture to tap a knee to the ground. You're assuming a position of weakness and submission before the person or the body, the organization to whom you are kneeling. And it was a phenomenon, a gesture of respect and submission that the entire world adopted, even parts of the world that were totally separated from other parts of the world. There was no conference where some guy from ancient China, the Han Dynasty or something, got together with people in Rome and were like, what do you think we should do? Just as sort of a universal sign of submission to kings and magistrates, authority figures. Like, I was thinking like this kind of thing with your arms, or maybe like this sort of like duck walk. And somebody else was like, I have it. What if we do like a kneel thing? And everybody's like, oh, wow, that is way, way better. Let's do what Carl said. Let's go with the kneeling thing. I mean, of course that didn't happen. It just evolved the same way because of what the gesture means. And I think in the last 12 or 15 years, that gesture has come back more in keeping with what it has meant historically. Okay, now you're wondering, is he just going to dance around it, or is he going to talk about the actual social and political things that happened that brought kneeling back into vogue and back into the collective consciousness? And the answer is, oh yeah, we're doing that. And you know why? We're just going to speak freely about it. Because we have trust, and we are so different, and we think about different things. We come at different stuff different ways. We laugh at different stuff. I'm sure we vote in different ways. And yet, here we are able to hang out with each other like our ancestors did, where we have a laugh about the things we see different. We make a point, make a counterpoint, think about it. Maybe we come back to it later, and you just hang out with people you don't agree with. You're great at that. So yes, I'm going to speak to how kneeling came back into public consciousness in these last few years. And I think it started straight up with one guy, Colin Kaepernick. He was the quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers, is an American football team. He's a dude who was raised in an adoptive Greek-American household, I think Greek, square with the last name, right? But at some point during his football career, he started to reconnect with his African-American roots. I think he went through a really meaningful process for him. And at some point, he felt like he wanted to engage in an act of public protest against, I think as he described it, what he perceives as systemic racism in places where he wanted to see change. And so he famously didn't stand up for the national anthem at some football games. And then some other people looked at what he was doing, and they really resonated with his message and with his experience. And they were like, I want to take some action in my own life too. Maybe I'll kneel for the national anthem as well. And there were other people who looked at it and were like, it's weird that the kneeling is corresponding so closely with you sort of falling off a cliff in terms of performance on the football field. And I don't think they gave him the benefit of the doubt that the things that he was trying to communicate were entirely genuine. And between the ferocity of the accusations from the people who were empathetic to what Kaepernick was doing, and the sense that this was not a genuine gesture on the part of the people who were critical of it, it got to be pretty feisty, pretty hostile. And that gesture of kneeling bled over into a bunch of other things as well. And eventually you've got politicians kneeling before community leaders and kneeling before social movements and organizations. You've got other people saying, I'm not kneeling for that. Then you've got a strong sort of God and country crowd counter movement to the whole kneeling phenomenon of people saying, I always get the phrasing wrong, but it's a catchy quip. It's kneel for the cross, stand. No, I got it backward. No, that's right. Kneel for the cross, stand for the flag. That's a very succinct way to articulate the position there. And look, all political preferences or all how you read that situation or continue to read that situation aside, what we can definitely agree on is that it brought the gesture of kneeling back into public consciousness as being something where at times there's a lot of social pressure to be like, hey, bend the knee, show that you think the thing. Or don't bend the knee to that. Stand proud and do not participate with that. And really, which gesture makes sense for which side kind of varies depending on what context you're in. And so very recently, this idea of public physical performative gestures to demonstrate wholesale alignment and buy-in with a given ideology, well, that's something that all of a sudden you and I can relate to. And I think if we're reading the book of Esther, even 15 years ago, we would not be able to relate to the pressures that are the breaking point in this book as well as we can now, because this public performative gesture thing is what Mordecai is faced with. And ultimately, for reasons I am not sure we totally get to know, he just doesn't bend the knee to this newly appointed Haman the Agagite fellow. I read the passage yesterday and the day before, and I'm going to read it again right now, just so we're dealing with the same stuff and it's in front of our faces. After these events, King Xerxes honored Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than that of all the other nobles. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him. But Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. Now again, not so long ago, I think it would have been really easy for us to read this and come back with an incredibly principled pronouncement of how things ought to be, or to even be maybe a little bit dismissive and be like, I don't know, like whatever, just kneel or figure the thing out. It's a long time ago. Everything's basically fake anyway. Who cares all your dumb laws and rules and social expectations? You people are all so stupid getting all worked up over things like that. And it's true. Things from the past and what people get worked up over, it looks pretty stupid now looking back. But boy, oh boy, do we think our things right now are terribly important. My goodness, these are the most important issues of all time. And why does it get like that? Because stuff means stuff. Come on, we all know that everything carries meaning with it. And you know when you look at somebody that they know what the meaning is of the thing that they're doing and they know what they're trying to communicate. Everybody knows that if I give you a thumbs up, it means one thing. If I give you the middle finger, it means another thing. Oh, come on, it's just a finger. It's just a digit. It's just for grabbing stuff. Settle down. No! We have an agreed upon meaning in our culture of what these things are. We have an agreed upon meaning for some of our silly slang words that are really just nonsense words, but they mean something. Gestures matter. And are they silly once they've expired? Yes, they look ridiculous in the rearview mirror, but the pressure in the moment is absolutely real. And in this moment, the principled thing for Mordecai to do, if he thought bowing down to this guy was a bad idea, is to not bow. And he knew that he would probably pay a price for just that, as we discussed yesterday. We don't know why he didn't bow. Is it because he didn't like the way Haman came to power? Well, the text doesn't really give us an answer one way or another on that. Is it because Mordecai believed no Jew should bow down to any leader in any way? Well, I don't know. I mean, everybody was bowing down to kings at this point. You got an example of the Persian predecessors, the Babylonians, where some people wouldn't bow to an overt idol. But, I mean, if all of these Jews are living in exile and they're functioning peaceably in the citadel capital city of Susa, where King Xerxes holds court, they're bowing to Xerxes and his officials, or they would already be in massive, massive trouble. So clearly bowing is happening, but Maybe Mordecai just decided this is a time to take a stand. No more bowing. Maybe he was thinking, I got to set an example for my people because this is effectively idolatry. Some people think that, but the text doesn't really spell that out, so it could be. Maybe Mordecai just really didn't like Haman for things that we don't know, and he knew that Haman wanted to hurt the Jews, and he wouldn't bend the knee to an age-old enemy of the Jews, an anti-Semite. And in the same way that I've seen some grand protest gestures, there was somebody who was on The Masked Singer. He's dressed up like a duck or a horse or a robot or something ridiculous. And one of the hosts, as soon as the mask came off, was like, I won't even be on this stage with you. And he stomped right off. Your politic that you did was the wrong politic. You're too bad. You're outside my Overton window. I'm leaving. Maybe it was that kind of a harumph kind of gesture as well. As we've been discussing for the last couple of days, we don't get the luxury of knowing. We can piece together a few guesses. But the reason I wanted to circle back to this and linger on this refusal to bow thing just a little bit longer was to try to make us a bit more empathetic to the gesture or lack of a gesture by thinking about the last 10, 15, 20 years in our own culture and the increased role that performative gestures of political or social alignment have taken on in our culture. I also wanted to try to increase our empathy level for Mordecai's situation on this by considering some of the consequences that you and I have no doubt both observed for people who did the wrong performative gesture in a given setting, or for people who refused to do the approved and mandatory performative gesture in a different setting. It's possible that Mordecai is not making wise or shrewd decisions here, but it took bravery, and I think we can empathize with that and relate to it. Or maybe he is being shrewd and he has motives that we just don't understand. Whatever the case, if you have been alive at all in the last 15 years, I think you are well positioned to relate to the pressures and everything that is going on in this particular situation. And now, look at that. We talked about a thing that could be potentially the sort of thing that we're supposed to fight about or feel like we're supposed to yell at each other now or not be friends anymore. And we're just fine. Weird. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.